thanks to everybody who for taking the time to join. And again, Asta and I, we go a long way back. We used to work together at LinkedIn. So it's great to see you back, Asta, after so many years. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you, Deepak. I'll start off with what is impacting everyone today in the world, the pandemic. I hope you and your family, both in India and in the US, have been safe and it has not affected. But I know it's a bit sad that a lot of people were impacted by it, but I hope you personally were not.
Yeah, I think knock wood again, by the grace of God, we both my family here in India, we have not been impacted. We have been safe, but we do know of friends in India who were impacted, and I think this has become the new normal for all of us now. So again, I'll encourage everyone to spread the word, and we should all get vaccinated as soon as possible. If not, and that's the only way we can stop this from spreading and be safe. It's not about just us, it is about the community. So that's the important reason why everyone should get vaccinated.
Yeah. The only small silver lining that I saw during this pandemic was that everybody is now a data scientist, right? I'm so happy that people are thinking about statistics, learning statistics to explain what's going on. This bent of mind of thinking around statistics, like I see that as spread. That's the only small silver lining out of this whole pandemic.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yes, I mean, this kind of shows the power of statistics and how you can use data to make good decision. Like statistics is all about making decisions in the face of uncertainty. And so definitely we are in that mode right now, and definitely the data that is coming out helps us kind of be more aware and make the right decisions at the right time.
Yeah, and switching to the same, like keeping on the same track of the pandemic, but switching to a more sort of organizational setting. A lot of companies initially were against the whole remote work setup, but then people are forced to work remote. And now more people are embracing remote work, while some companies are asking people to come back when the situation is becoming better. So everyone has taken a different approach to this issue. Like we at ShareChat, for instance, use this as an opportunity to have a remote hiring hub. We have open positions for all AI ML across the world. And certain other companies are doing this as well, using this to sort of make sure that they can grow their team across the world. What is your take on this as an org leader? How do you see remote versus in-office working and the hybrid mode?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think, to be honest, we are all still learning how this will all play out, because we were all in lockdown and everything was fully remote. And a lot of us saw that the productivity did not deteriorate. But I think what we missed out probably was this opportunity cost. Like when people are together, new ideas and new innovations become better. Things like brainstorming, that social connectivity between people, that is what's compromised. Like when I look at my pulse surveys in the organization, yes, a lot of things are great, but then the number one thing that is not there is people are not feeling as socially connected as they were. But at the same time, the pandemic has taught us that software can be written by being remote. We don't have to be always in the office together to kind of get work done. So I think some kind of hybrid model is going to be the future. We'll become more flexible, which is good news because talent is everywhere. There is no reason for companies to be just concentrated in a particular geographic location when they are kind of building products, right? And most of the products that we are building, especially in our space, is global. So it is important to have a workforce that is diverse. That's the best way to kind of build a product that is inclusive. So moving forward, I think we will all converge to a hybrid model. What that model exactly would be, honestly speaking, I don't think anyone knows. We are all experimenting and we are trying out different things. And maybe in a year or so, we'll find out there are some things that work better than others, and then we'll all start converging on that.
Absolutely. Thanks for your thoughts. So moving on to the focus of this sort of here, there are a lot of people who are in the audience who are all, let's say, getting into data science or moving from different fields into data science, or or taking steps into like org leadership. So the different kinds of people in the audience, and I've seen some of the questions that they want to ask. So before that, like I want to talk about your journey. Like how was your journey? Like let's start from, I know it was in Indian Statistical Institute in Kolkata, and from there on to a PhD in statistics, looking at conservation and ecology. Talk us through the journey. So
Yeah, so I think when I look back, when I started, I didn't think about going the path that I went into, right? And so this is again a very clear reminder to everyone that career is not a linear journey. Like it is highly non-linear, and you stumble upon different things while you're pursuing your passion, and then one thing will lead to the other, and you'll end up in the right place. And so when I started out, I really used to like math, and so that was the reason why I decided to pursue statistics. And when I was in India studying at the Indian Statistical Institute office, I was very interested in theoretical statistics. So that's what I concentrated on. But then while I completed my work at ISI, I started feeling an urge to do applied statistics like that. Like, okay, I was always asking this question, okay, well, all this wonderful theory, studying all the Neyman-Pearson lemma and experimental design, how do I start applying it at scale? And at that time, it was not very easy to kind of do these kind of projects in India. I mean, you can easily do theoretical stuff, and the compute facility at ISI was wonderful, and there were some great teachers with whom I learned from. So I really grateful for that. But then that's what helped me to pursue my journey next. In my PhD program, I kind of decided I will work on applied statistics rather than pure theoretical statistics, and I was very fortunate to kind of collaborate on a wonderful project in ecology, which was studying deforestation patterns in Madagascar, which was very fascinating. I mean, Madagascar is again a rainforest which has very diverse species, and it is very important for the ecological balance of the earth, right? And so, but there was a lot of deforestation happening there. And so the question was, how do we study that? What are the causes of deforestation? And so ended up building a lot of spatial models using Bayesian and MCMC. So it was a lot of fun. And during the course of that, I got exposed to a lot of big data, GIS data. And so I just wanted to then pursue a career where I can work on statistical models for very large data. And so at the time when I graduated, there were not many places that had massive data where you can do that kind of work. There was NASA, and then there was Bell Labs. Those were two big places where I can do that kind of work. NASA, I couldn't get in because I was not a citizen. So, so that's when I joined Bell Labs. And that was a wonderful experience because I was able to do what I wanted to do, but in a very multidisciplinary environment. Like, so I was able to collaborate with computer scientists, and I was able to collaborate with applied mathematicians, machine learning. I would say the 4 years at Bell Labs really gave me that interdisciplinary experience, and the ability to kind of solve hard problems using computation by borrowing great stuff from all disciplines. That's when I started going to all the computer science conferences. So that was my computer science experience for 4 years. And then obviously there was an internet revolution happening, and that's when I decided to join Yahoo. And at Yahoo, I had a lot of fun doing personalization and inventing all the multi-arm bandit thing that are used in social media, and then kind of being able to take all the work that I was doing for the product and abstracting that out and writing academic papers and doing research. We had the ability to do both at Yahoo Research, so that was very nice. So after my Yahoo journey, I kind of felt like I want to spend time helping others pursue the same kind of career and make the same kind of impact. I mean, there were so many smart people I saw around myself, like who were very good in machine learning, and but I felt there is a gap helping them connect to how they take all of that talent and make an impact to real world. So that's when I decided to move to management, and I joined LinkedIn, and there I was there for 8 years, doing a lot more management than what I did at Yahoo. And That was again an amazing experience. Building a team from the scratch. Like when I joined, I had a team of 6, and when I left, it was around 600. And so obviously, the impact that team had on the business was extraordinary, I would say. I mean, it was a lot of fun to see how AI and machine learning can really have such a big impact on the business on a regular basis. It took time. First 2 3 years was more establishing the discipline, but then it really took off. And our CEO used to call ourselves this AI first company. Like that was, so to summarize, when I joined, AI was a nice to have. When I left, it became AI was a must have, right? And that's how I kind of characterize that 8 year journey. After my LinkedIn journey, I decided like I will pursue something where I can do the entire end-to-end product cycle, because what I realized when I was at LinkedIn, especially in the last few years, there is a lot of potential to kind of take the AI that we build, but kind of blend it with user experience end to end. And that can actually amplify the impact that the AI can have in the future. So AI need not be just a back-end kind of optimization framework. You can actually have a much bigger impact through AI, especially on social media, if you blend the AI with the user experience. So think about AI right from the beginning, not something that is just used to optimize the user experience. You have to think about it holistically. So that's why I took up this job at Pinterest, and I'm having a lot of fun. I've been there for a year, and it's a lot of fun kind of thinking about AI and the entire end-to-end stack, and how can you blend both to kind of magnify the impact that you have on the it's more like building a human understandable AI. So the interfaces, users need not talk to AI as a black box. You can actually make your AI more blend into the user experience. So it's more like a human understandable AI, if you will. That's actually more powerful than just the backend part of the AI component.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Thanks a lot. I think, if I may, I want to share 2 stories from observing you over the years. And so one of the things is that, I mean, I met you when I was the coordinator for the Yahoo Summer School that was organized, and you were one of the speakers for the first time. And then, of course, like worked at LinkedIn with you almost under direct mentorship. That was a really good, nice time. But one thing that I've noticed that you have a core group of people that absolutely blindly trusts you and follows you wherever you go. You worked with them for a very long time. So that's almost like a required sign of a good leader, that they're able to like mentor and have that kind of trust with this core group. So that's one thing that I've noted. And the other one that I've noted is that you are never tensed. You're never like, you never always have time. So if I come across you in the corridor and say, I'm thinking of this problem, and you say, come, let's take a room and discuss, right? Or if I send a long email, you say, let's get on a call. And not just during work, right? Like a couple of times I've reached out to you for mentorship as well. And then when I like think about what to write to Deepak, he's very busy and I have to write all this context before I reach out. The first thing that he says, let's get on a call, right? So, and that's amazing that you have you're able to organize your day in such a way that you have these nice serendipitous moments where you can listen to new ideas or help people. How do you manage this?
Yeah, so I just love interacting. I mean, I'm very fortunate to have worked with so many smart people over the years. I think that has been a very fundamental reason why I've been able to do what I've been able to do. So, I mean, it's not like the people blindly following me. I also blindly follow them as well, right? So, it's kind of both ways. So, look, I think that's what I enjoy doing, right? So my passion, it's all about, as a technologist, your passion is first and foremost to remember, you are here to solve technical problems. So yes, you can get involved in management, and there is a lot of things you have to do to kind of make the management go smoothly. But the first thing I always remember is the first job I have is being a technologist, right? So again, I didn't go to an MBA school, and I never thought I'll kind of do management as my career. So management is something I picked up, but like my first job is to be a technologist, and you can't create great technology unless you make time for such serendipitous discussion, because most of the great ideas come from those serendipitous discussions. I've learned that in my years at Bell Labs and Yahoo Research and others. Like, I mean, most of the great ideas came out from some hallway conversation or some lunch meeting we were having, and suddenly one thing leads to the other, and then you find, oh my God, this is what really works. So I always try to make time for that, because if you stop doing that, then you kind of you know hinder your ability to create great technology, and then nothing else matters, right? I mean, everything matters, everything works because of the technology you create.
Absolutely. And regarding this AI first, like we brand ourselves as the first and only AI first company from India, and it's a lot of learnings to have from what you said about core experiences and baking AI into all the core experiences, right? So this is something that be it the creator ecosystem, or be it like personalizing feed, be it UI UX design, like giving those tools for the users to give us feedback and so on. I think there's a lot to learn from like the global giants on what some of these problems, how they are tackling it. But there are also some unique challenges to, let's say, the audience and the ecosystem that we are in. So there's a lot of synergy in terms of the challenges that we are facing. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah, of course. I mean, again, you are also one of the giants in India, so it's not like learning from the giant. I think everyone should learn from. We should all learn from each other. So yeah, and it's amazing to see the journey of ShareChat and Moj. I think it's the amount of growth that you have, and it's still growing rapidly. So it's amazing. Congrats
Thanks.
for yeah.
Thanks a lot. I borrowed this from my Facebook days of in Facebook they say this journey is 1% done.
Yes.
And I say that like for us it's 0.1%, and there's still yeah.
It's still a long way to go, but yeah, it's impressive. Like, I mean, the cold start problem has been solved, right? Like, so that's the most difficult component, right? And then it is all about execution and how you get along in the future.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Sorry, just moving slightly to a different topic. Like you were also the executive member of KDD, and you were, I think, participant or like sort of one of the organizers of the first iKDD and so on, the India KDD. How are you balancing that, and what is the mission of KDD? What is your charter there?
Yeah, so the SIG-KDD, as you know, the most important thing the SIG-KDD committee does is kind of hosting the conference that we have every year. And so the charter is to make sure that we are, well, the conference is going very well, and the program is all streamlined, and we have a great audience. We have a diversity of topics. We make sure that the conference kind of has its own identity, and we worked a lot on making sure that there is diverse representation in the conference, and the finances are all in order, how to make sure we are scheduling the conference on time, and what are the slots where we should, what are the locations. That's what the committee was overseeing. And so in my tenure there, I was very heavily involved in making sure the applied track was working well, because when I joined the committee, the applied track was not going very well. It was kind of treated more as a second class citizen. Okay, if you don't get into research, although I published most of my papers in my past life in the research track, but I think one of the things that attracted me to KDD in my early years is that was the only conference I found that was a bridge between theory and practice. So in the old days when I used to go to NIPS and ICML, they were all great conferences and I loved them, but they were more on the theory side, like new methodology. But KDD kind of brought people from different disciplines together, people from database and statistics and other parts of computer science together. And there was a big emphasis on taking the theory and kind of applying it to very real problems. So I just wanted to make sure that that identity that KDD has is preserved. So I focused a lot on making sure the applied track was kind of elevated, and I was working very closely with Johannes Gerke. So Johannes and we were very much involved in that. And looking back, I think the applied track right now at KDD is much better shape than what it was before. So every member of the committee, they had something which they will go deep into, but then we all used to make these broad decisions about where to what is the location, how many attendees should we have, what should be the identity, the marketing, the sponsorship. That's what the committee used to do.
Absolutely. I think we are bringing that spirit into the IKDD, the India KDD event.
Yes, I did attend one IKDD. Yeah, it was wonderful. Yes, it was in Pune, so that was great.
Yeah, so this Applied AI as a premier venue for Applied AI, and that is coming soon, like to this year as well.
Oh, that's great to hear. Yes, wonderful.
So this gets us like a good segue. I mean, the intro is over. We have captured your journey. You've captured your leadership journey. You've captured your community contributions. But this is a good segue also into like a focus on the AI ML research that you've been undertaking, not specific to yours, but more as an advice to people and how you think about some problems. So, I mean, if you think about it, like in my high school, my maths teacher used to say that, oh, physics is just math plus some common science. Don't worry about physics, right? Physics is just maths plus common science. Whereas my physics teacher would say mathematics is just a tool. It's not going to solve physics problems for you. You need to understand physics and use math to tell you what the answer is, but like basically you've done. So there's a similar kind of thing that's happening with machine learning. People are pulling at it from different threads, right? So they're saying a statistician says that it's just stats with some programming. That is machine learning for you. Whereas a control theory person would say, oh, this is just reinforcement learning with a new lens. You're just, or this is control theory with a new lens, right? Like reinforcement learning is control theory with a new lens. Or a physics person would tell you that this is just statistical physics and stochastic processes, right? Or philosopher would just say that, oh, this is just epistemology, right? Like there's nothing here. You're just, the nature of learning is what you're pursuing. And whereas a computer scientist would say this is probabilistic programming. You're doing programming with some probability involved. What is your take on this? Like, there's so many different views. How do people get into this field from different areas?
Yeah, I think, look, all of us would have some kind of academic training. So that kind of shapes our thought process. But like some of these problems that we are solving, again, one thing is very clear in solving all the problems we're talking about, which is large scale computation. So there is no getting away from that. Like that's what every field has embraced, like whether it is physics or biology or social media. The common pattern we are seeing is we have massive amounts of data. And then we are kind of solving this problem in a more empirical way, where we take data, we do a lot of computation, we learn and we experiment and we repeat. And that's how we're solving problems in this modern world. I think the old, we're not seeing a lot of E equals to MC squared kind of solutions, although that is also important. I'm not saying that should not be done. I mean, that actually moves mountains, but they take a long time. Right now in the modern era, the computation is the best way or the most feasible way that we have experienced we can solve problems. So everyone has to know how to do large scale computation. So that's like the foundation. So I think in the old days, we used to say math is the mother of all sciences, and that's still true. But I think we should now also start telling like the new generation, like computation is the mother of all sciences is also something that is true, right? So everyone needs to learn computation and how to do compute and all of that stuff at a very early age. In addition to math, we should be teaching computer science, in my opinion, from maybe middle school, right? Like there's no reason to delay that education until high school. That definitely needs to change, right? Now, once we have that, whether you do statistics or operational research or machine learning, that's fine. I mean, it's all getting at the same thing, right? Like you have data and you kind of have a mathematical model to understand the data, and then that model is what is helping you then learn from the data and apply it to real life and see and then iterate, right? And so whether you come from a machine learning perspective and learn VC bounds, or you do statistics and learn likelihood, yeah, I mean, they might look dissimilar, but at the end of the day, they can both help you solve the real world problem. And once we have these tools, I think we all need to kind of work together in an interdisciplinary environment. That's what I learned from my Bell Labs experience and Yahoo Research, right? The power of having, so that's why the diversity of workforce is so important. You don't want to hire all statisticians to solve the problem. You don't want to hire all, you have to have a diverse workforce who can think differently. And then when all those bright minds come together with different thought process and then collaborate to solve a problem, that's when magic happens. I still remember when I was at Yahoo Research, John Langford and I, we used to have a lot of debates, and And I remember talking to John about propensity score matching, and then he actually really liked that idea, and then he took it and he incorporated that into his replay framework, which was then published at him. So you can see like how information from one discipline kind of flows into the other discipline and can influence. So to summarize, everyone should know math, everyone should know computation, and then you can pursue any field, whether it's electrical engineering or operations research, or doesn't matter. But then what matters is your attitude, your growth mindset, your passion to solve real world problems, and then it all comes together, and things happen, right? But if you don't know computation and don't know mathematics, it might become hard. Like you might be able to solve problems a little bit, especially the easier ones, by running tools.
Mhm.
But to solve hard problems, you have to know how to think about the problem, and that's where these two things really matter.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember some of the discussions like between John and you. I was just sort of fly on the wall on one of those, and then like where this was around, John had this thing that you should not look at the data until you have formed your hypothesis, and you were of the opinion that the data exploration is what lets me form the hypothesis. So
Yeah.
there was this very interesting thread that was going on. Yeah.
But again, both opinions are good, right? Because the push on both sides is what helps us come up with new solutions. So that's the main point I was trying to make. Like if you have everyone thinking in the same way, then you miss out some aspect of the problem. You don't end up with a great solution. Like whereas if you have people thinking in different ways, then if you can collaborate well. I mean, collaboration is important. Like we should not kind of dismiss others. I mean, then it won't work. But like if there is a desire to collaborate and learn from each other and blend the good of all approaches, then we come up with very magical solution. And that's what happens when you work in an interdisciplinary environment.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Uh, and then like, what is your thought on like, let's say a single person doing both ML research and applied ML, right? So we have spoken about this and you had touched upon this a little bit before, but how do you view pure ML research and publications and advancements in the, let's say, theoretical understanding of machine learning versus applied AI or applied ML? How does one wear both hats at the same time? Any advice for people who want to do this?
Yeah, look, both are important. Like someone needs to kind of study theoretical machine learning because I mean, machine learning is still a very young field. So as we keep doing applied machine learning, and we are seeing a lot of success with that, but in order to advance the science, it is important to understand properties of these methodologies. And so that's where theoretical machine learning is important, because the more we understand, the better we can do things in the future, right? So it all depends on what you want to do, right? Some people are really good at theoretical machine learning and they want to really go deep, and that's what they want to dedicate their careers to, and that's fine. And some people like to be more close to the problem and then take a more empirical approach and solve the problem. That's also fine. And some people like to straddle between both of these things. So I think the key is, no matter what you do, just solve the real problem, right? Do not simplify. It's better to get an approximate answer to a real problem than an exact answer to a artificial problem. I mean, that's really what I think is more important than anything else. So as long as you're solving something that is going to help us understand or help us create a better solution for something that is really a real life problem and that could really make an impact to the world, it's okay, right? I mean, there is no problem with kind of pursuing whether you pursue theoretical or applied, doesn't matter in my opinion. And again, it's a continuum, right? Like we keep straggling between one extreme to the other, depending on your interest and depending on what you're good at. And if you're not good at theoretical, then pair yourself up with someone who's good in theoretical, and then kind of form a team and then solve the problem. Right? So we don't have to solve everything alone, right? I mean, that's where the teamwork and the diversity of thought process becomes very important. And that's how we should form teams as well, in my opinion. Like when you're forming machine learning teams, you should kind of make sure that you have different kinds of people who can work together to kind of solve these problems.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, we're having a lot of success pairing up like data-minded software engineers with data scientists themselves, along with analysts. Like I think this is a good, I mean, almost discovered by accident, but I think this is a good pattern that sort of fits what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. And in your opinion, traditional machine learning versus deep learning, this is a question that keeps coming up, right? Like, hey, should I even care about what came before? Or is it only like deep learning right now? Or someone who's wishing to sort of get into deep learning but have access to, or like have knowledge of traditional machine learning system, they're like, this is too much. This is not the way I was taught, or this is not the way I learned. So there's this always, there seems to be this barrier between traditional, or like at least a thinking barrier between traditional machine learning and deep learning. I don't feel that, but what are your thoughts on that for people approaching to learn or getting into this field?
Yeah, so I mean, neural nets have been around for a long time. Like I remember my first research was with neural net, and I gave up because the compute was not there. So in the 90s, I thought I'll do my thesis in neural nets, and then I started working on it. And after 1 year, I realized it needs a lot of computational power to kind of do. And so, yeah, at some point I realized I won't graduate if I pursue this thing. So that's why I thought, okay, well, I need to graduate and get out of poverty soon. So that's when I changed my thesis topic to study ecology and do spatial modeling, which was also computationally intensive, but not as bad as neural net at that time. So neural nets have been known to be powerful methods. I mean, there are theories which say it can approximate any function to any degree of accuracy, right? If you kind of increase the network. So the computation and the data, they're also very data hungry. So in the old days, we didn't have that much data. So now we have the perfect storm in some cases, in some sense, right? Like we have data and we have compute power, and that's why these methods are so successful. I mean, I would just think of them as powerful non-parametric function estimation technology, but then they are proving to be really, really powerful in very high dimensional settings, like, you know, when you're doing NLP, computer vision. So, but the underlying machine learning theory is still the same. Like we still have to think about how to optimize a highly multimodal problem. I mean, that's really the hard machine learning problem. And then, you know, you don't have one good solution, you have many solutions. So what is the best way to converge to a good solution? How do you regularize, and how do you do high dimensional model fitting, but still control overfitting? Like those things are exactly the same. And yes, this is yet another parameterization. So I'm not seeing any issue with that. Yes, the software has changed, so we have to just get accustomed to the software. And in fact, the software is much easier than it used to be in the old days. Like if you use TensorFlow and PyTorch and all, I mean, that's actually pretty convenient. And the fact that we can actually do things so easily on such large amount of data, compute on the cloud is actually, it's actually amazing, right? I mean, in the old days, I remember when I started working on big data in early 2000, it was pretty difficult to kind of do, like I would write my own distributed computing programs and all. I mean, it was not very easy to do these things. And nowadays it has become a piece of cake. So it's actually nice. I mean, I don't know why there is, I don't think there is a big, I mean, it might feel that way, like, oh my God, this is a big thing, but it's not. Actually, it's the tools that are out there have made it very easy. So I would encourage everyone to embrace. I mean, one thing in machine learning is do not kind of shut down anything, right? I mean, if there is a new idea, try it out and learn it and see how it does. And that is going to help you create the best method. Now, that doesn't mean the old style is not good, because sometimes you will also want to use them as well, right? So in some cases, there might be practical problems where SVMs might make more sense, right? For the cost consideration, or maybe you need some model where interpretation is more important. So you might still want to use that. And the simple method helps you understand the principles of machine learning better than others. And the most important thing, whenever you are building a more complex model, you need to have baselines, right? So how do you know a neural network is doing well unless you have a simpler baseline? Because with neural net model training, there are a lot of parameters you have to tweak. Things can go wrong when you're implementing. It's not like the method is bad, but something might have happened to your data, or something might have happened to how you do your model fitting, or there are so many places where errors can creep in. And so having a baseline which is based on simplicity always helps you make sure that the more sophisticated method you're using is actually working, right? And so even for benchmarking purposes, you need to know the simpler method so that you can actually appreciate the sophistication through more modern methods.
Makes sense. Thank you. Thank you very much. But this leads to the next question, which is like, there's a lot of talk about democratization of AI and impact of, but then there's also this issue of impact of compute power, right? You rightly pointed out TensorFlow and PyTorch as one of those democratization tools. But this compute power is sort of still quite exorbitant in terms of like, it's a big entry barrier for many startups, many individuals. Like, for example, we spend more than $100 million in compute power every year, right? And some of the biggies spend an order of magnitude more than that, like global biggies. So this is not available to most companies. Like if you take even the most successfully funded startups, their in their sort of fundraising would be a small portion of this yearly budget for a company like ours, right? So how does this play out? Like, is this true democratization? Are these tools good enough without access to either the data or the compute power? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think democratization is still an aspiration, in my opinion, as you said. Like, I mean, I don't think we have democratized AI in a true sense, right? Like, because the most important thing for the AI to work is, first of all, you need to formulate your problem, right? Like, otherwise you end up solving the wrong thing, and so nothing else matters. But then, as you said, like the data is very important, right? So if you're a small startup, your data volumes would be smaller, and so you cannot afford. So deep learning and other modern methods won't work very well if you have small amounts of data, at least not now, right? I mean, there is a lot of research happening, I know, in unsupervised learning and zero-shot learning, and as those methods become more mature, then it will start working better. But in general, data is something that is more discriminatory, in my opinion. Like someone who has a lot of data would have more advantage than someone who doesn't have a lot of data. And then, as you said, the compute power, although it is available, it's expensive. Like not everyone can actually afford it. So, but I would still encourage, I mean, that's where the simpler methods that we talked about earlier becomes important. So in order to reap the benefit of AI, you don't have to start with the most sophisticated. You can get the first 80% with even simpler method if you have formulated the problem right, and then you trade from there. And then when your business grows and your user base grows, then you can embrace the more modern methods and get more juice out of it. Like getting a 1% lift or 2% lift on a small base is not as spectacular as getting a 1 or 2% lift on a very large base. And that's why bigger companies that have already scaled, they invest more in this, because a small percentage gain from the technology can have a magnificent impact on the business. But when you're smaller, I would focus more on the UI and how do you actually build UIs and user interfaces that can help you collect more feedback from the user without putting a lot of friction in the process. I think that's another problem that can actually have a huge impact on the AI you do. So AI doesn't start from the data that is already on your servers. AI starts when you start thinking about how should I actually even understand what the user is doing. And that in many cases depends on the UI you are building, understanding if your UI is only giving you very implicit indirect signals, then no matter what AI you use, you are not going to do that well. But if the UI can actually give you more direct signals about what the user is feeling, their emotions and their happiness, then you start getting a lot of juice out of the AI, even if it is a simpler method, right? So those two things are very important. And when you're starting out, I mean, as a startup, you have that advantage to kind of learn from others and then do some more innovation on the UI component and how you kind of understand the user. So although the startups have some disadvantage, but they also have the advantage of kind of learning. Like if you're building a new system today, the commenting system on social media doesn't work very well because there is a lot of, the moderation is not very good in many cases, and you kind of see a lot of comments that are not great. But if you're a new company, you can learn all of that from the existing, and then you can actually change your interfaces and your design to kind of mitigate some of the problem right from the very beginning, and that can give you a very big advantage. It's hard for an established ecosystem to completely change the ecosystem. It's kind of going to take lot more time because a lot of people's involved in the ecosystem already. And so if you make a small change, it impacts a lot of other people in the ecosystem. You can't make very drastic changes. But as a startup, you can actually be very drastic and kind of go in a very different direction. And that's where you can disrupt and innovate, right? And so so it's interesting, right? I mean, you have disadvantage, but you also have advantage, in my opinion.
Awesome. So thanks a lot. I think we'll shift gears for the next 10 minutes. We have audience questions at the end, a few questions. We'll shift gears into you as a org leader. And you mentioned a little bit about why you became a team leader, like, what you thought when you moved from Yahoo to LinkedIn, what was your intention in going into that role? And you've scaled a team from 6 people to 600 people, like you've said. So one thing is that in this building AI teams, do you have a secret sauce? If you have to say this is the one thing, and you said diverse already, like, is that your secret sauce in terms of building successful AI teams?
I think there are many factors. So first of all, I think this is not a problem nowadays, but in the old days, it was a very big problem. It was hard to always convince the business that they should invest in AI and ML to get a good ROI, because AI and ML at least takes time before it starts giving you gain. So I think that was the first challenge that I had to kind of deal with, like to convince the entire management chain they should really invest in this, because that can have spectacular ROI. I'm hoping nowadays that's not a big problem. And then the second thing is you have to, so the same solution won't always generalize. That's why I'm hesitant to say like these are the 4 things you should do and it will work, right? I mean, it depends on what you're trying to do with the technology. Like if you are in a medical domain, then your team might look very different than if you are in an internet space, for instance, right? So if you're looking at the internet domain, let's focus on that for a while. Yeah, you'd need a team that has a good mix of infrastructure, people who are very strong in computation, and then some people who really understand the theory so that they can then collaborate and build these solutions. The other thing is to kind of make sure the teams are focused, right? So that's another thing. So you have to create, this is something that I found really challenging, to create teams that are focused on clear deliverables and so that there is accountability, because otherwise it's hard for teams to kind of operate if they don't know the North Star. But then at the same time, you have to make sure the teams all can see the true North Star. Like, okay, my goal is really to make ShareChat successful, and that's possible if the users are coming back to the site every day, right? But for the users to come back to the site every day, there are many different things. Like the feed has to work very well, the notification has to work very well, the people recommendation has to work. And each of these teams are optimizing for their own local objectives, which is important, but they all have to also know and understand that they together need to collaborate to optimize for the ecosystem. So there will be a situation where they have to sub-optimize their local metric to globally optimize the ecosystem. So that realization sometimes is hard. And as a leader, you have to really work on that, I think, to kind of make sure the teams can understand and see that and see how these are all connected, and they can start collaborating across the board. So yeah, I would say those are the 2 big challenges. And then the third, which is not just particular to AI, it is particular to everyone. How do you balance the short term and the long term, right? So if you just work on very long-term projects and the business does not see any impact in the near term, then the management might start losing patience, like what's going on here, like why am I not seeing? But if you only focus on the short-term optimization, then you don't innovate for the long term, and then that's also dangerous because then you fall behind. So generally, I always spend my time thinking of the right portfolio of investment, like what should be invested in the long term, what are those long-term bets that we should take, and then obviously how do we make sure that the short term that we are doing is efficient, like so making sure that the entire process of doing AI end to end is as efficient as possible, because if it's more efficient, those things can be done more routinely. Many of those things can be done automated in an automated way, and that gives time for everyone to innovate for the future. And then tracking progress clearly, like whenever there will be a lot of experiments teams would run. So making sure that we are keeping track of what experiments ran, what did we learn from that experiment, and everyone should know what the learning was so that they don't repeat the same mistake again, or at least they can learn from that experiment and come up with better ideas for the future. Right? And so these are some of the things that as an org leader, I think you have to spend a lot more time on than going into individual methods. I mean, that's also important, but you will always hire smart people who can do that. But like making sure that this whole end-to-end process is working efficiently, making sure that people are learning from failed experiments or and successful experiments, and making sure that the ecosystem optimization is working properly, and making sure you have the right portfolio of long-term and short-term, making sure you're building the right team, the bar is high, and making sure, of course, you're performance managing people, making sure you are being compassionate and putting the right people in the right role. All of those things become really important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I had a separate question. You've already answered that on long-term bets versus short-term bets and sizing bets, but you already got into great detail. A quote that I really like from one of my former managers is that when he was a research manager, he used to say that if more than 2 out of these 10 bets succeed in 3 years, we are doing something wrong because we are doing research.
Yeah.
More than 2 succeeded. But when he was an applied research manager, that number became more than 4 of these and within 1 year. Yes. And when he was an engineering manager, it became more than 6 of these within 6 months. So if more than 6 of these bets succeed within 6 months, we're not taking the right bets. We need to be. So that was the way he thought about projects across engineering, applied research, and research.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Yes.
But I wanted to ask, like, but you've already gotten into great detail on how you do the portfolio management, I think. So,
yeah, that's always hard. I mean, again, I'm not saying there is a fixed formula. That's where leadership comes in. I mean, leadership is not a mathematical formula, as we all know, right? It's hard. So everyone has their own style, and that's totally fine. But like, these are more the principles. Like, and you have to just focus on that a lot more as a leader than as an individual contributor.
Absolutely. As almost the last question, and then we'll move into the audience questions. As almost the last question, I want to talk about the LinkedIn AI Academy. Like, I really like that innovation that you brought in, and you sort of had everybody learn about machine learning techniques and AI. And you opened it up for not just everybody within LinkedIn, but also a lot of these lectures are available for anyone who wants to learn. The reason for starting that is that basically saying that, hey, we are unable to hire any more strong AI researchers because this is also like a very small resource pool. But you have smart people in smart analysts or smart engineers, and with a little bit of training, they can be good AI engineers. Or is it that you believe that AI would play a role in everybody's job within LinkedIn? What was is there a distinction, and what was the reason?
Yeah, I think it was more the second reason. It takes a village to get AI right end to end. Like, you cannot just have AI researchers building models and expecting it will work, right? Like, every function in the company has to have that mindset, right? It starts from marketing and legal and product and design. Because if all the cross-functional partners are not bought into that and they don't have that mindset, it is very hard to build a very good AI solution across the company. Like, if the design team doesn't understand the importance of AI and how it works, then when you're designing those user interfaces, there will be a lot of misses, right? I mean, you will always optimize for efficiency because that is going to reduce the cognitive load, but then the feedback loop is going to suffer, right? And that's one example, right? Similarly, if the legal team doesn't understand the nuances, then they will be very risk averse, and you will get a lot of pushback when you're trying to do anything with your data. And so it's important for all the functions to understand the importance of AI. So I think that was one of the most important reason why I kind of started that. And it was actually very successful because most of the sessions were attended by very cross-functional team, right? And we had people from legal and sales and design and product. Everyone used to attend that, and that kind of raised the awareness of what AI can and cannot do. And then, when the team started having conversations on a regular basis with cross-functional partners, things became much easier than what it was before. Earlier, it was like a black box to everyone, and now you kind of opened up the black box, not fully, but The high level is not hard to understand. And then the conversations got much better and new projects started developing because of this understanding and interpretability of what AI can and cannot do. And I think that was the biggest gain. Yes, of course, we also got some people who wanted to transform their career and become AI scientists. That was a byproduct of that, I would say. But the first one was, in my opinion, the biggest needle mover for the company. And that's how you make an AI first company. Like if everybody in the company, if all functional disciplines in the company do not have that mindset, you will never become an AI first company. It's just not possible, right? And so that's what I'd say was the biggest advantage of kind of creating that academy.
Got it. Yeah, I enjoyed a lot some of the videos and yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you very much, Deepak. I think like this is sort of the end of my questions, and I had amazing, like great pleasure interacting with you as usual. I think
it was amazing. Thank you for taking the time, and thank you for organizing this. I had a lot of fun chatting with you, and hopefully the audience enjoyed it as well. And we can obviously take some questions, but if we are not able to answer all your questions, we can continue. You can ping me on LinkedIn, and I can answer the questions, and we can have a conversation about some of these as well. I'm sure we cannot fully answer everything today.
Absolutely, Deepak. We had a small token of appreciation sent to you, but as with everything else in COVID, it's delayed. I hope it brings back some memories of Kolkata when you actually get it. So
yeah, of course. I try to go to Kolkata every year, but because of COVID, I've not been there for the last 2 years. So, but definitely, yes, I really appreciate that. I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Thanks, Deepak. Srijan would be hosting the audience questions.
Yeah, so some ML applications are already available as a service, right? Like for instance, if you look at things like text to speech, speech recognition, even some of the computer vision recognition technology, these are all available as a service, and it's all being streamlined. I think the way it happens in ML, in my opinion, is when a problem is a bit nebulous, it takes time, but then after a while, people understand the entire end-to-end and everything is nailed down, and then it starts becoming and graduating into a service. So that's why you're seeing some of these things have already become service. You can just call an API, and like if you want to do language translation, you don't have to do your own thing. Like it's pretty not straightforward, but it is well understood, and that's why you can actually get it to an API. You don't have to build it on your, like if you want to do some closed caption in a movie, like you don't have to build your own closed caption, right? But some other like feed ranking and all, I think it will eventually become a service. Right now it is not, because there is a lot of heuristics that I use across the end-to-end system. So if you're running very large scale feed system like in ShareChat, I'm sure you do a lot of optimizations to minimize the cost, and there is multi-stage ranking, and then you tweaking different stages, and even the objectives are not very clear. And okay, well, I don't want spam, but I want to increase engagement. Well, no, but it's not a lot short-term engagement, it's more long-term. Well, but what are the indicators? And it is very tied to your UI as well. And then how do you understand your users? So there's a lot of these nuances that have to be customized, and that's what makes it.
Where you attend more stand-ups, you're talking about all the problems that we discuss every day.
Yeah. So this is again, I commonly refer to them as street fighting, right? So you always have to do the street fighting every day to make your system better. But and like a good example is video player, right? So if you want to do video encoding and video player in a Wi-Fi 5G network, you can use off-the-shelf thing, and it works. But like if you want to do good video player in a low network bandwidth thing, you cannot use open source. Like you have to do your custom player, right? So it's the same thing for feed and other things as well. Like it's for simple application, I think it should. I believe there are solutions available on the cloud, but as your application becomes more nuanced.
Oops, sorry.
As your applications become more nuanced, then you have to customize it to get the maximum bang for the buck. But yes, I mean, you will all see, in my opinion, each of these AI things becoming more mature, and they will all graduate into services over time. And then just as you use your Apple Watch, you will start using them as well. Like, but then new problems will come in, and then those will take more time. And so it's a graduation process. You know, you start with the problem, and then it becomes well understood, and then it graduates into a service. Like 10 years ago, speech to text was not an API. Like, I mean, there were a lot of nuances, and everyone was building, like IBM was building their own thing, Model 1, Model 2, Model 3, Model 6. Every version was different. It was not easy, right? And so, but now it is easy, right? With the deep learning stuff that's automated the whole thing, and it's very well understood.
Right.
Yeah, so privacy is something that you have to think as a principle when you're building product. It is not just about ML, right? Like when you're dealing with your data end to end, you have to start thinking of that as a principle when you're developing your product, because privacy, as we all know, is like something can be, it gets breached based on the weakest link. So when you are, my principle is don't use more than what you need, right? I mean, so if there is some information that you don't think you need, don't store it in your training data. Like, you're just kind of increasing your risk. I think nowadays with all the deep learning and all the transformations that you do kind of are by definition. So that's one fortunate thing, like all these embeddings and other things, they by definition are privacy preserving, right? So I don't think there's a big problem there. The problem happens when you are dealing with your data management system, right? So in the data management system, that is where you have to ensure that you are thinking about privacy, and do not use information that will discriminate against users. Like, okay, if you are using gender and all that, like, okay, you have to ask yourself, is that kind of creating non-inclusivity in your product, right? And so that's more like a business decision. So, and again, this again goes back to the objectives you're optimizing. Like, if you blindly optimize for short-term engagement, in many cases, you kind of start getting into this issue. But if you start thinking long-term, you might get a lot of clicks and shares in the short term, but you will alienate a particular population of your product, and then they will not come back, right? But if you start thinking of more inclusivity from the very beginning, then that population will grow, and that's going to give you more growth in the future. And so that's the mindset. And so it's not just machine learning, it's also very deep product thinking. Like, every company needs to have a point of view of how they're building the product, and then machine learning can only help you achieve that strategic goal. Machine learning cannot be used to grow your product over 10 years. Like, that's a hard problem. I don't think machine learning can solve that, right? So it has to be all baked into the objective and your data management systems, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I think from my privacy preserving machine learning research team, right, using that hat, I want to challenge that deep learning models are by definition privacy preserving, because that's not true. It's been shown, like at least for images and also in text, that you could seriously breach some of the training data if you know how the training, like if you're aware of, so there's privacy by obscurity because you don't know the training process. But if you do know that, then there's like different models by which you could breach some of this. So there are some issues there, but I completely agree with the product first approach, right? So where, like for instance, for something like a Pinterest or a ShareChat or a Moj that we have, it's almost like we don't have friend connections. We don't have too much static information that we collect from the users. It's by definition privacy friendly because it's mostly what you do on the platform that decides like what your feed is going to look like. None of the other data, like your date of birth or like your location or something, is not something that we absolutely require for the feed ranking itself, right? So I completely agreed on that part.
Yeah, like at Pinterest, we spend a lot of time building what is called inclusive AI, right? So like, if you are looking for, if you do some search, fall fashion, we don't want to show you only result of white skinned people, right? Like, so how do we create more diversity? And so our computer vision systems, we have ensure, like I think the biggest needle mover was when you're collecting your training data, you ensure that there is enough diversity in your training data. And that kind of ensures eventually that you are building a more inclusive recommender system. Some of these aspects might get lost when you're doing these recommender systems, but they become very important factors in the long run, right? And so that's the kind of thing you have to identify. There are some factors where you have to intentionally include them in your objective functions. And there are others which you will always learn over time. Like you won't be able to figure out every aspect of inclusivity and fairness, but like if you know that there are some that does have an impact on your user base, then that needs to be included in your objective function as well.